Hi everyone, it's John. It is April 28th, 2021, and I have another book review for you this afternoon. It is one more book review from the publishers over at New York Review of Books, with my sticker still on it. There's a copy of it. It's Houses by Borislav Pekic. Introduction by Borislav, with a sort of very cubist, modernist looking, apparently something from 2009 called Untitled by Philip Dujardin. The art on the cover, that is. With the publication of Houses, originally called, in the original Serbo-Croatian, it's called The Houses of Belgrade, published in 1970 by Borislav Pekic. New York Review of Books continues its, and I've talked about this in other reviews, its legacy of republishing sometimes wonderfully successful and sometimes abysmally bad books, and saving them from the dumpster heap of literary history. Thankfully, this particular act of salvage is a well-chosen one. It's a pretty good book. Houses is one of a cycle of 7 novels that Pekic wrote that explores sort of the deep intermingling of the personal and the political, sort of akin to Zola's own 20-volume Les Rougon Macquart cycle, which he spent decades working on. While Pekic's novel is largely a success, his life, biographical information, serves as a really good foil for the passive observance of his protagonist, Arseny Negovan, which I'll get into in a minute. Pekic was born in 1930, and in 1948, at the age of 18, he was found guilty of associating with the Association of Democratic Youth of Yugoslavia, and was imprisoned for 5 years until he was 23 in 1953. Before the end of the decade, he started taking notes on a series of novels that had 2 constant through lines: a deep suspicion for dogmatism and authoritarianism of any kind, and in equal measure a healthy pessimism for any idea of human progress. I guess living through the regime of someone like Slobodan Milosevic will probably do this to someone. After his 1971 self-imposed exile to London, he continued to write and have his work published and translated into multiple languages. In 1989, he became one of the first founding members of the Serbian Democratic Party, and the next year he became its vice president. 2 years after that, in 1992, he died from lung cancer in London. So the novel is set in real time 1968. That's when the character is existing, but a lot of it takes place in sort of flashbacks when he's thinking back, particular to one special incident I'll note. The riotous year of 1968, right? 1968 was the year of the Prague Spring. It was a huge year in European politics. Pushing on towards 80 years old, we have our protagonist, whose name is Arseny Negovan. He finally decides to write out his will and testament, and to do this would require him to leave the comforts of his home to set out and survey the dozens and dozens of houses that he has acquired over the years. However, Arseny hasn't left his house since March 27th, 1941. So 27 years. March 27th, 1941, a date which would have been fresh as a wound in the minds of his readers as the day of the coup d'etat, after Yugoslavia's signing of the Tripartite Pact with the Axis powers. Instead of going out, leaving his house, and checking on his houses himself, Negovan occupies the window seat of his apartment, where he fantasizes and passionately invigilates over his holdings from afar. For nearly the last 3 decades, he's let his wife and his attorney deal with his real estate affairs by themselves. To compound historical irony upon further historical irony, once he finally leaves his house and enters 1968 Belgrade, contemporary Belgrade, the world of the Prague Spring, he finally realizes that his world isn't as he remembered it, and his houses are really no longer his. Much like The Remains of the Day, which I reviewed not too long ago on this channel, written nearly 20 years later, Houses is about someone holding on to a world which no longer exists, and the tragicomedy that can result from that. The real driving force behind the story is Arseny's obsessive love for his houses, each of which he is endowed with feminine names. They are as Pekic writes, a chronicle of his life, his sole authentic history. To say that Negovan anthropomorphizes his houses would be an understatement. He even endows them with an anatomy all of their own. Pekic says, quote, I was schooled in houses' physiology, their circulatory system, their epidermic defensive envelope, even their stomachs, their sensitive stomachs, not to mention their life process. But despite their brute physicality, the houses and their place in Arseny's imagination rest on some sort of border between memory and hallucination. Like I said, NYRB is kind of a hit and miss house when it comes to publishing fiction. Their nonfiction is first-rate across the board, superb. Fiction, I've read some real clunkers from them, but this wasn't one of them. This was quite good. Borislav Pekic, Houses by NYRB. I will see you next week. Next week, a bit of a treat. I'm going to throw some chum into the waters and show you some new books. See you then.